sprechen, dann kann ich hier reinhören. Ja, ich mache kurz laut im Raum.
Okay. Wunderbar. Dann hoffe ich, dass das mit dem Mikrofon alles sehr gut funktioniert und freue mich sehr auf die Panel-Diskussion.
Hast du sie kann, Stream? Christian? Stream, hast du sie kann? Er macht zu, muss. Und du Stream? Ah, du bist schon am Streamen?
Okay, so I can. Okay. Oh, look, I have a voice. It's amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hello. Do you guys hear me now? Awesome. Hi there. Not yet. Never mind. I'll just keep talking until you hear me. So many channels. So many channels, so little time. That's how I feel about social media. Life's hard enough, right? Like, who needs TikTok? Seriously. But I'll be here all week, ladies and gentlemen. Tip your waitresses. I'm just gonna keep talking. We're gonna talk about SDGs today, people. Yes. Okay. I have 3 minutes, so I'm gonna put my face on. I'll be right back. Offenbach. Do tap dancing. Oh, and we're back. Hi guys. Do you hear me now? I have yet to hear you, and I have yet to see you, but I cannot wait. I'll just keep talking. Does anyone hear me? Is anyone alive out there? Can anybody hear me? Hello, hello. I'm still talking. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming closer and closer to the closing ceremony of the GLC 2021. It's been a suspenseful and highly anticipated moment, and it's been an exciting week, and I have yet to say hello to you panelists, to you wonderful people out there. Hören die mich jetzt, Beat? Nein? Okay, dann rede ich einfach weiter. Yeah, there are about 100 GLC members joining us. Yeah, here we go. Oh, hi guys. Great to finally be heard. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the closing ceremony of the Global Leadership Challenge 2021. After an exciting week full of inspiring encounters, meaningful discussions, and effective collaboration across borders and disciplines, we're delighted to welcome you in St. Gallen and around the world. We have a nice group of people sitting here. I'm very happy to have a live audience as well tonight, this afternoon. And digitally, we have over 100 GLC members who joined this year's GLC from over 30 countries and also from the University of Oxford. The global partners of the St. Gallen Symposium and the University of Oxford are in fact here physically here in St. Gallen, some partners of the St. Gallen Symposium, students from the university, and the GLC members who've joined this year's GLC from the University of St. Gallen. So it is, in fact, the GLC is a joint initiative of the St. Gallen Symposium and the University of Oxford, and it's also supported by the main partners, the Lehman Foundation and Templeton World Charity Foundation. And this year's GLC is the second iteration of this initiative with the goal of empowering the next generation of leaders. Throughout this week, more than 100 emerging leaders from more than 30 countries have engaged in with more than 20 senior experts from business, policy, and academia to work on about 20 SDG-related projects with impact, focused on all kinds of areas, but we're going to see today the 3 finalists and really hear in detail what they've been doing. The 3 finalists have been selected by the University of Oxford and the St. Gallen Symposium to present their project ideas at today's closing ceremony, during which the award jury will have to make some tough decisions about who will be the ultimate winner of the GLC 2021. The winning team will be able to participate in the 51st St. Gallen Symposium in May 2022 on the theme Collaborative Advantage as Leaders of Tomorrow. And all 3 winning groups will be invited to an exclusive leadership mentoring offered by the Oxford Character Project at the University of Oxford. So all winners here tonight. Before we get to that, though, what are we going to be hearing besides these 3 projects? We're going to actually, at the beginning, have some opening words from Dominic Barton, and we'll also be hearing from the 3 finalist groups on their project ideas. There will be a panel then, while we wait for the jury to make that tough decision, about responsible leadership and for sustainability in corporations and businesses. And finally, our award ceremony, where we will honor the winners and the one first prize winner, and the jury will announce that decision. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome Dominic Barton to the stage, so to say. And before we hear from the finalist groups, we'd like to welcome Dominic Barton. A little bit about you before we talk, sorry. He is the Canadian ambassador to China and has served as the global managing partner of McKinsey & Company from 2009 to 2018. He holds a master's in philosophy and economics from the University of Oxford, where he studied as a Rhodes Scholar and currently serves as the conference chairman of the St. Gallen Symposium. He therefore served as what could be considered the matchmaker of the 2 institutions that brought this GLC to fruition. So welcome, Ambassador Barton, your brainchild here taking place for the second time. What does the theme of this year's GLC Global Leadership Challenge mean to you? The power of purpose. So how can you really identify, first of all, purpose and really promote it on an institutional level?
Well, thank you, first of all, Maggie, for having me on this program. I'm so excited to hear about the participation from all around the world. The 3 finalists sound absolutely terrific, and I'm so glad that there again is this collaboration between Oxford University and St. Gallen, and really look forward to seeing the results. I know there's been really, really good ideas that have already been shared. With the theme for this whole event on purpose, it's a word that's bandied around a lot, if you will. I think for me, what it means is it's about having a positive impact on the world, and that's a very broad scope to think about, but it's having a positive impact on the world, and there's so many ways that one can do that. And just from hearing a little bit about the 3 finalists beforehand, I think that that just illustrates that factor. But so I think it's about having impact, a positive impact on the world. My own sense of it, and everyone should explore their own view, is I think when you think about your purpose, I think there's a very important element of giving. You're helping, you're putting energy into a system as opposed to taking. You're trying to make it better. And I think that provides a lot of energy for you in being able to achieve what you want to get done. So it's that, what is the area that you want to have a positive impact on the world on? What is the area that's going to give you the energy in terms of bringing something to the table, giving? That's just in my narrow mind how I think about it.
I think that was beautiful. Also saying really this idea of giving rather than taking. I think during the holiday season, that's particularly meaningful to a lot of us. Also the word purpose, of course, in Gen Z or the young generation nowadays, purpose has derived also kind of a new meaning and also a new urgency. And so what would be your advice as someone who's seen many things? What would be your advice to young people regarding their search for their purpose and how they can act on that purpose and really form their values around that? What would you advise to them?
It's a great question, Maggie. I think I'd sort of try and take it in two parts. I think one is, as I mentioned at the outset, there's a lot of ways to improve the world right now, whether it be climate or helping the bottom billion live lives like we want everyone to live lives on so many different dimensions: healthcare, education, jobs. I mean, so there's, I think it's just exploring a bit the range. For example, look at the SDGs. You mentioned that earlier, but so what are those areas? And then I think the important thing is I'll tell you what maybe not to do. Don't do what other people say you should do, or, this is really important where it is. Try and understand what actually drives you, what gives you the energy when you look at those different areas of where things need to improve, what excites you. And that's a gut view. It's not analytical. So there's the look at the world and where are the opportunities to make a difference. That can be systematic, if you will. But I think more importantly is your gut and what gives you energy. And I would try and define it, if you will, as narrowly as you can in some ways. Like once you've picked an area, try and be quite specific so that you have the ability to make a difference. So if you're very interested in climate change, which is obviously a huge issue, there are so many areas to get, maybe to focus in on, and what is it that excites you, that will, as they say, will make you run to work. You want to look in it so it doesn't feel like work. It's actually, it's a hobby. It's a passion. And if you can combine a huge need for what the world needs with something that you're passionate about and also to be paid for it, that to me is nirvana. And it's there, it's out there, but don't let other people define it for you.
Some wise words, Dominic Barton. Thank you so much. I think a lot of people can take away from that also this kind of trusting your gut, not letting the noise kind of affect how you feel about the purpose that you've chosen. Thank you so much, Dominic Barton. We'll enjoy the rest of the show, so to say. And thanks so much for your kind introductory words.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. So, during the Global Leadership Challenge, around 25 groups of about 3 to 5 members worked on impact project focused on one of the SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals. In cross-generational dialogues with senior leaders such as Bogolo Kenewendo, the former Minister of Trade and Industry in Botswana, or Hovig Etemenzian of UNHCR, or Fernando Reimers of Harvard University. They discussed how to act and also the potential solutions to solve the problems that these SDGs seek to address. Design thinking solutions, responsible leadership workshops, and all of these kinds of interactive ways of conversing about ways to change the future all took place and really the aim was to give the teams the tools they needed and methods of how to think about and narrow down these pressing issues into really actionable steps. So we've seen outstanding ideas across the board, and as Dominic Barton said, it was very difficult. Also, it was very, very good ideas, first of all, but it's going to be very difficult also for the jury today, and it was difficult for the people at the University of Oxford and St. Gallen Symposium to pick these 3 finalists, and today we have to narrow it down to just 1. So we are looking forward to hearing from these 3 finalists, and they will be evaluated by the GLC Award jury. And that is comprised of Professor Amanda Schanz, Professor of Management and MBA Director of the University of St. Gallen, so from town, and he's also here today with us, and Professor Alexander Betz, who's Leopold Müller Professor at Forced Migration and International Affairs at the University of Oxford. And we also will have Kim Pullman, who's co-founder and chair of Reboot the Future. And all 3 of them will later join us to crown the winner of the GLC 2021. So now we move to the first group, the first team, who will present their project to us. So our first finalist group is 3.4. So they've worked on SDG 3, good health and well-being. And presenting it will be Ankit, hi. Ankit Anand, who's joining us from India. Tell us quickly, who formed your group and what did you work on? And basically, what was your idea?
So, hi everyone. So I'm Ankit, and together with my teammates, Jacob, Max, Andreas, and Robin, who are joining from St. Gallen, and me joining from India, totally in a hybrid setting. And our group worked on SDG 3, good health and well-being. So, globally, primary care is a place where people go first time when they get sick. Have you experienced in your surrounding that lack of knowledge in primary care health professional led to worsening of patient's health condition? Statistically, more than 58% of preventable death in low-income countries are attributed to medical errors. Therefore, commonly it is said that lousy healthcare is sometimes worse than no healthcare. Though this knowledge is well established and very much efficiently used in some demographics, it is missing in other demographics, contributing to health inequity. And trickle-down effect of this knowledge from one demographic to another takes years. And this results in HCPs practicing medical procedures which are years old. This needs to change. We propose a platform for peer-to-peer knowledge sharing between global medical professionals in real time. Our app Medurum brings SCPs from around the globe together to help each other and empower each other to through the knowledge sharing. We have even a mock-up design, so you can see a QR code on the screen that you can access the mock-up. It is a forum where physician can take second medical opinion on the treatment on case-to-case basis. The discussion threads are publicly accessible, creating knowledge pool. For developers among you, it's like moderated Stack Overflow for medical professionals. We understand that medical knowledge is sensitive and open discussion can lead to chaos. Therefore, we'll have a paid expert moderating the content posted and ensuring high quality. The platform will incentivize active members by providing them reward credits that can be encashed in different forms. For example, gaining work experience abroad and this kind of rewards is fascinating, even for experienced and well-established physicians. This can also be used to enhance their domestic career pathway. This way, we ensure the engagement of physicians on our platform. Existing Facebook groups of medical associations do not provide similar one-stop solution for primary healthcare. Also, these groups are run by volunteers, not appropriately moderated, leading to broken engagement and low quality standard. Our solution will support WHO's patient safety goal of reducing treatment error and can reduce preventable mortality by up to 58% in low and middle income countries. Additionally, this will foster global medical collaboration, trigger policy discussion towards good balance between the standardization and contextualization of medical practice worldwide. We will hear from the local communities how they do it. Through our platform, we will be showing responsible leadership by empowering local communities and taking a step in the direction of healthcare equity by ensuring seamless access to standard medical knowledge. Our platform is founded around the principle of listening. We will promote conversation versus dictation, that we are not sending a standard procedure of hospital from one part of world to another. We'll enable discussion on case-to-case basis, contextualize the knowledge. And last but not least, our reward system enables senior and well-established SCPs to get on-ground experience from other part of the world. We believe this will help them by experiencing heat on the ground and thus foster empathy among them, which unfortunately get diminished higher up the ladder you go several times. Thank you for your time. We are happy to hear question on this.
Thank you, Ankit. Yes, applause, please.
Thank you.
Ankit. It's hard to take a bow on a virtual call, I know. But this is fascinating, and also it's just such a needed thing we've seen now over the past 2 years, how important it is to democratize this kind of first medical contact that people have, and making sure that people can get the opinions that they need, also second opinions, third opinions. So what a great idea, first of all, and an interesting way to launch it, in this idea of a forum and this idea of collaborating through doctors. Very exciting, and I'm excited to. Basically, I'll, they say in German, drück die Daumen. I'll cross my fingers for you or press my thumbs, and all the best, Ankit. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we come to our second finalist, and this is group 4.7, and this group has worked on the inclusive education SDG and the SDG 4. So presenting it will be Ben James. Hello, Ben.
Hi. I'm Ben, and I've had the huge privilege to work in a team from all around the world, with Zhuang from Vietnam, Rubian from South America, and Ari from Cameroon. And our focus was SDG 4. And when we started talking about education, we realized that the most adverse effects of climate change have fallen on the shoulders of those who are least educated about it. The world's poorest 50% only contribute 10% of global emissions, but they're also the main victims of the climate crisis. And conventional climate education is extremely poor at engaging students because of its focus on climate science rather than the effects of climate change and what can be done today. If you think back to how you were taught in school, acid rain, carbon cycles, melting ice caps. It's not climate science that gets us engaged, it's seeing the climate injustices taking place all over the world. But what if we could radically improve the quality of climate education for people who are the most vulnerable to the climate crisis? So our solution is Gale, Global Access for Learning About the Environment. Gale uses existing low-level technologies to educate and create a community for climate change action. Gale is a chatbot that delivers localized and personalized climate education through WhatsApp. And as you might be able to see from the slide, WhatsApp is highly ubiquitous in countries with less infrastructure and education. So our chatbot has two main aspects. The first is education. So once a week, the chatbot sends microdoses of climate information that are relevant to the recipient's location and context. For example, the fact that climate change will double the chance of a flood ruining harvest in your area in the next 10 years. And then the recipient can choose to either learn more about adaptation, for example, by learning about how to make crops more resilient to flooding, or to engage more deeply by contributing their own local perspectives on the topic. The second aspect is community. Gale can introduce you to local climate communities by adding you to WhatsApp group chats. For example, you could learn how to protect livestock from diseases that will become more prevalent in warmer climates. You could bring together a group of people to fund and install a solar panel, or you could participate in communities that want to take broader action, like running campaigns or protests. So just to expand on the crop example, in Cameroon, where Ari is from, there are some regions that produce a lot of cocoa beans, which is a crop that's quite vulnerable to climate change. And Gale would be able to engage cocoa producers in what climate change is, how it affects them, and how they can adapt to safeguard their incomes from it. So that could be by providing information on how to plant the most effective shade trees for cocoa, how to take out crop insurance, how to plant at different times of the year, how to grow different crops that are good alternatives in your local climate, and also to connect communities who want to figure this new stuff out together because they've noticed their harvests are changing and they're scared about what to do about it. Because Gale is a tech solution, it can be implemented in less than 6 months and it's really cost effective. Scaling from 1,000 users to 10,000 users is really easy with modern cloud platforms like AWS. And it needs minimal resources compared to more physical solutions. And we would launch and promote Gale through local communities and campaigns, local platforms such as TV shows and radio programs, local events, and social media influencers. The fact that our solution exists entirely within WhatsApp provides an opportunity to engage with communities affected by climate change who are otherwise not equipped with the educational background of why the world's changing and how to adapt. Responsible leadership means listening, observing, and meeting the needs of local communities. So rather than supplying instructions to our users, we're providing them with the knowledge to engage, explore, and develop their own unique solutions to their local challenges. Thanks.
Ben, this is also a very, very inspirational project. Also really going low threshold and saying, okay, let's take the road that they already travel on and just give them a different car. Fantastic. I think it's really interesting. I have a question to you. Who writes the content for this this chat bot?
Definitely. So I think we were considering taking like a hybrid approach. I'm going to zoom out because I've got some of my team here in case they want to jump in.
Oh, it's hard when you have the background all fuzzy. Yeah, well, you guys are out of focus. Sorry.
Yeah, very difficult. But the first, we're kind of considering like a two-layered approach. So the first would be using existing data sets on what climate impacts are around the world. And from our research, we found there are quite a few of these for different types of impact. So that kind of gives us the broad idea of what's happening. And then the second part is kind of the human level. So actually taking that broad data and working out what the impacts are on specific communities. So hopefully that two-level approach is the most efficient.
So what I think is critical is because WhatsApp is geolocated, we can really pinpoint where these communities are, and when they start feeding back information to us, because this platform allows a two-way conversation, we can really adjust and correct the platform and the educational content directly for that region and that community. And hopefully we'll have people inspired through this and have finding purpose through this to agency and get involved and help and contribute for their local communities as well.
It's a very empowering project. I think this is a fantastic idea. Even if for some reason you don't continue doing this in the GLC, totally make this happen. This sounds like a great idea. Thanks so much, you guys. Thanks to the UK and Ben and team. Thanks, everybody. Our third finalist group is 5.4. They have worked on the Gender Equality SDG 5, and our presenter will be Christiana, hello, Coyote, who is joining us from the United States. Hello, Christiana.
Hi. Did you know that unpaid hours of work, of domestic work, is the missing link between the gender wage gap analysis and the lower quality of life for women? Hello, St. Gallen. Hello, University of Oxford. And hello to the world. My name is Christiana Coyote, representing my team, Team 5.4, and representing my teammates, Alexandra and Chico. 13 years ago, my father died due to some health complications, and my mother, the mother of 6 children, was left with the responsibility of taking care of us. And do you know, it took her 8 years, I repeat, it took her 8 years to get out of the societal norm and expectation and what she was used to, which was catering domestically and taking care of her children. You know what that is? The ripple effect of that is the quality of life of herself, her children, and even our generation and my own kids. It is a ripple effect. Now, 8 years after, she came to the point of breaking that cycle. And in less than 3 years, my mother turned a $420 business into a $6,000 business. Now, what am I saying? What I am saying to you is that the power of unpaid domestic work is so powerful. Now, how do we tackle this problem? What are the actions that we're going to take? How many of you have picked up a habit or a dance step or a style from the social media, even without realizing it? Here's what our solution is: leveraging the social media to change the narrative and consequently the mental model that backs up the big problem of unpaid domestic work. TikTok alone has over 1 billion users as of September 2021. Here's what the solution is. We will roll out a Become a Wife for One Day challenge or campaign, using and partnering with influencers to kick off this campaign. And you know, the social media has a track record for it. Talk about the Me Too campaign. Talk about the NSAS campaign that happened in Nigeria in 2020. Here's how the campaign will go: a narrative or a video of what your day would be as a wife, and one thing you wish you knew earlier and would now change. And then the third part of the campaign is you nominate the next participants. We are going to be strategically nominating participants, including institutions. And platforms that we'll be using include Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube, amongst others. With this, I bet you we are on our way to leaving a legacy for a better world for the next generation of women. Our responsible leadership goals include sustainable solutions to gender stereotypes, leadership with empathy, and a better world for the next generation. If you don't remember anything I said on this speech, remember the numbers from the Me Too movement. Over 85 nations were affected. A legislative reform came about in France as a result of the Me Too movement. In the USA, where it all started, 84% of companies reported harassment. That's because people could now feel safe to talk about it. And 70% of companies in the USA put trainings in place to avoid sexual harassment in the workplace and also to tackle it. Here's what I'm saying. The social media is powerful. It is going to keep being powerful, and we can leverage this to change our narrative and that of the next generation of women. Thank you.
Christiana, thank you so much for the presentation. I think I've heard a lot of gender equality promotion approaches. This is the first time I've heard about being a wife for a day. This is, I think, an inspired concept. How would this look then on social media? We're talking like reels where somebody says, "Oh my God, I was a wife for a day. It was insane," and then they tell their story, or is that what's it look like on social media?
So it can take two forms. It's either a narrative or a quick short video, as you can see everywhere on TikTok, usually between 56 seconds and 1 minute, where you can literally do a compendium of what your day was like. Or you can just sit before the camera and do the narration here. But what underscores all of this is the ability to empathize with the women folk at the end of the day. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And who knows? I mean, regardless of whether you win today's award, I gotta say it would be fantastic to have this be the new ALC challenge. I would love that. So thanks very much, Christiana. So those were our three finalists. Thank you, Christiana. Those were our three finalists. Everyone, please, applause. And now we have a very hard decision to make. Actually, we don't have to make the hard decision, but our jury has to make the hard decision. And so one of our jury members who's here live will go to an undisclosed location where they will discuss in detail who deserves to win today's GLC 2021 award. So we have plenty to do in the meantime, so you don't have to worry. We are going to have three fantastic experts here on stage with us to discuss leadership through sustainability, how leaders can make sustainability a common culture in their company, and what that means for different kinds of leaders and different kinds of companies. So first, I would like to welcome Judith Walls to the stage. Professor Judith Walls is Professor for Sustainability Management at the University of St. Gallen. Big applause, please. Second, I would like to welcome Christian Mumenthaler. Dr. Christian Mumenthaler is Group CEO of Swiss Re. And last but not least, Sarah Maria Nord. She is CEO and founder of Sanoge. She's also a PhD student here at the University of St. Gallen. So I'm going to come sit by you. Much cozier here, gotta say. Great.
Very nice.
So the aim of the Global Leadership Challenge is to help emerging leaders, young leaders, to grow both in wisdom and knowledge, of course, but also in character. It's also about, what do you take with, do you need some help? Okay. But also to really, really help them shape themselves into leaders that they're proud to be, really. And a lot of the sustainable development work around achieving the SDGs is a little bit vague or hard for people to grasp. And bringing this really to, first of all, this generation, but also into this kind of short period of time in which people really work like a hackathon almost on these projects, it really focuses it in. And hopefully will help transition to a more sustainable and social future. But, you know, that's all a dream world unless we look at the actual applied part of it. So, Judith Walls, you have actually researched a lot about the ways in which leadership and traits and the motivations of leaders can really make a difference in how a company, first of all, changes into a more sustainable way of operating. But what were the main findings that you had in your research? And also, what kind of leaders does it really take to lead a company into a more sustainable future?
Yeah, thanks, Maggie. I think this is a really important question because it's not so obvious that every single leader will pursue some kind of sustainable development goal or sustainability goal. I think what's really important or really critical about what's happened today or over the past week with this Global Leadership Challenge is the exposure, right, that the participants get. So the experience of really immersing themselves into these challenges to get to know them in depth, even through, well, it's partly a formal education system, if we want to call it that, but also the informal exchange that happens between the team members, just so that they are becoming aware of it and they're thinking about this. And in fact, in my research, I've seen that when we talk about now leaders of corporations, like CEOs, like board directors, this kind of awareness and exposure through experience is really critical. If leaders lack this kind of awareness, and it can be formal or it can be informal exposure to, say, environmental topics, social impact topics, then there's very little intrinsic motivation for them to pursue sustainability. But when they have it, it somehow embeds itself in their own value system, and then it becomes something that they desire to do.
So we need sustainability propaganda for CEOs. Okay.
Propaganda or simply taking them out of their, you know, everyday context, for example, and the everyday problems that they face. You know, these are very busy people, and giving them that space and that time to immerse them into something else or expose them to something else. And we have quite a lot of anecdotal stories of CEOs, for example, that visited, you know, their operations in a developing country for a while, saw how people lived on the ground, got immersed into this problem, and then changed things, right, in other ways. And it's the same for natural environmental topics.
So many examples of this, but we have a live example here on the to your left. So Christian Momenthala, tell us a little bit, as the group CEO of Swiss Re, one of the world's largest reinsurers, and basically generations of tradition, you know, kind of old school ways that also have probably changed many, many times, probably at least once a decade. And you are in the leadership seat. You have your hands on the joystick of change and are basically deciding which direction it goes in. So what do you think, how do you try to affect your approach to leadership to improve your organization's sustainability?
Yeah, I think what you just said, I think there's some things maybe I want to correct, because there's stereotypes that I hear frequently, right? There's this impression that a CEO can do anything, that you have ultimate power in organization, and you don't, right? This is impossible. I think an organization is like an organism with tens of thousands of people who have their own emotions and beliefs and so on. So it's really an organism that is doing something, that has a purpose. And of course, when you become CEO, you have a certain amount of power, but it's a bit like riding an elephant. It's if you want to go in a direction that the elephant doesn't want to go,
you're not going there.
You will never get there, right? So, and it's more symbiotic than this simple you have power. So I think very good example is I came into Swiss Re. I'm a scientist by training, but not a climate scientist, and so it is actually Swiss Re where we had experts who were talking about this in the beginning, and I was skeptical. That's 20 years ago, but you know, I thought maybe there's other things that can explain what we're seeing. But through this constant, you know, exchange, I got very convinced about the climate science and what we're seeing here, and that it is real. And also Swiss Re, from its DNA perspective, is a long-term organization. We pay claims from contracts that were written 50 years ago. So everything in the organization, in the culture, is oriented towards the long term. And that had an effect on me, making my career through Swiss Re. So once I'm a CEO, I can reinforce certain things, but they're already here. So going in that direction for Swiss Re was not a particular leadership challenge. Leadership challenges are typically where the organization has if it has no appetite, there's no chance. But if there's little appetite or emerging appetite, then you have a. But that's still difficult. I think in the sustainability field, it's more the company, created me than I gave a direction to the company.
Could you explain what you mean by appetite?
Well, this is like I don't know how to explain it. I really have this picture of an organization as a biological being. So it has all these beliefs that it's changing, adapting to the future. Obviously, it wants as a leader to lead and make decisions, but overall, it has a clear sense of what it wants and what it doesn't want. And so if you feel the organization realizes there's a challenge in the environment and it needs to react to it, once there's enough belief it needs to react to it, I think then you have the best chance as a CEO to actually influence it and go over the hump. But what I'm saying is you have lots of cases also of companies that are not at all ready, where there's no readiness in the organization, and then leading change becomes extremely difficult or impossible because you will have body rejection of the CEO.
Yeah, from both sides, frustrating. Yes.
Maybe I can build on this a little bit, and the research also supports what you say, that when there is no kind of motivation for the rest of the company to do it, becomes very, very difficult. And then there are two pathways, right? One is that with expertise, CEOs gain informal power through being more persuasive, being seen as the one who knows how to address this. But lacking that, you then need external stakeholders to put pressure on companies for change. So, yeah.
I think it's really interesting also to have that specific thing to look at in research, because it's such a different world. For instance, with as you said, 20 years ago when you came into the company already existed, and there were 20-year-long contracts or decade-long contracts that you, of course, have to fulfill and all these kind of things. Very different for you. Our founder extraordinaire over here at the other side, Sarah Maria Noord, you essentially have made sustainability the absolute core of your business and the business model as well. And this is kind of every startup's dream is to be impactful and successful, right? And you've really found a way to do that in the textile or fashion industry. And first of all, how do you make what you do sustainable? What was your approach there? And what kind of technology really can assist you there? How were you able to find your way?
Yeah, thank you for I think this question already tips to the core problem of the fashion industry, because if we're having a look at the fashion industry, I mean, like, it's the worldwide, the second largest polluter. And while talk about like cars and meat consumption and travel, sometimes the fashion industry really gets out of sight. And why? Because like production conditions, they are far away, they take place in low-cost countries. The humans involved, they are not very present because they are very, very low salary workers, so to speak. And there is not like this pressure, just like in the aviation industry or also like in the insurance industry where there's actually a lot of like capital and cash involved. So in the fashion industry, the overall level of technology and digitization actually is very low. And here our approach is to bring as much technology into, let's call them conservative fashion processes as possible to really break the rules of the conventional fashion system is working. And in the fashion segment, there is real disruption needed, and minor improvements are, honestly speaking, just not enough. So we really have to completely redefine how production systems work, but also what we actually offer to customers. So in the fashion industry, we started from a point in time where we had like 2 collections per year. So coming over to then became en vogue to have like 4 collections a year. Nowadays, we have up to 12, 20, even 30 collections produced every year, and not like one collection with, let's say, 5 to 15 items. Those are masses, tons of fashion apparel items that are produced and then like burned or destroyed again, or just like not even sold. So 10% of all the entire mass of apparel which is produced every year is not even like shown in the stores, because the demand cannot even like there is too much product, there are too many products, and the demand is, it's always a bit like fluctuating. it cannot even absorb this masses. And I mean, like here, coming back to your question, our approach to that is that we have been developing a system where we can really exactly meet the demand of fashion with a highly automated on-demand production approach. So what we are doing is we have been automating every step in the supply chain, in the sewing, cutting, pattern making, supply chain, value chain, which can be automated, is for our venture automated. That means that we deliver some extra value, so the customer does not have to choose from a special collection, and there are like 4 or 30 collections every year. No, actually we go one step further and we say we turn the customer into co-designers, and they can design something into in a configurator. Therefore, we do not need to do some pre-production of, let's say, like 500,000 pieces of a specific design in a specific size, and then just like hope and pray that there are going to be customers that buy it. We only produce what is really being ordered, and because we have automated and digitized everything which can be, this enables us to do that in a very, very short time span. And this also enables us to follow an urban manufacturing approach, which means that we can, and we do produce in Germany again, at the place where actually the demand is for the DACH region.
Wow, I mean, to me, this sounds like you are addressing one of the core COVID problems, actually, supply chain. Does a day go by nowadays when we don't hear the word supply chain in the news? I don't think it does. So it's fascinating how you've approached this, really interesting. Now I want to get to the kind of research part of this. So if we're looking at these two sizes of organization, these two also ages of organization, I'm sure there are different challenges for both, right? But in general, putting sustainability at the core of your business in the way that you've done, but also not with the only reason for doing it being impact, but also really also saving people money and these kind of things. What are the most pertinent challenges when you put it at the core of your business in this way, saying this is to make the industry more sustainable because this is going wrong?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we are talking about businesses in the end of the day, you know, so the goal is always to make profit, or at least enough profit to sustain financially, as well as thinking about environmental impact and social impact. I think the challenges arise when businesses kind of forget that they're there for more than just financial purposes. You know, the origins of corporations were always to have some kind of social impact or a social project, something that could not be done by an individual but required a joint effort of some kind to get done. We've kind of lost sight of that over the years, and then we moved into a very shareholder primacy kind of model where everything that we do is for the people that own the company. I think now we're seeing a little bit of a swing of the pendulum back, that we understand what problems that creates for the rest of us, because we have externalities or things that create a negative impact on the lives of others who are not part of this company, like people who have to breathe in pollution because of some of the production processes that are happening, or water pollution that might take place, or social conditions that are not favorable, low labor costs, child labor. So these were things that were previously considered outside of the mandate of company. Nowadays, we're asking companies as a society to bring them back into the responsibility of the company. So that means that leaders of companies, large and small, startups or established companies, need to take these things into account. What is the key challenge there? I think the key challenge is the multiplicity and the broadness of the things that need to be addressed. I mean, an insurance company is, very knowledgeable in insurance, and they know how to think about what premiums they might have to pay out in 50 years' time and manage that risk. But when we ask this company to also address climate change, it's a very different question, and different skill sets are needed, and different thought process and different leadership. What I think is inspiring or really critical is that without the desire of the leaders at the top of the organization to go down that path, it's very, very difficult. And so when we see examples like this, where Sarah is kind of taking this initiative and bringing others on board to do it and creating sort of systemic change, that's very, very powerful.
I think, yeah, absolutely. It's very inspiring what you're doing. And what you just said now as well, I think, is an important factor, right? I once did a pilot for a big television station, about impact investing. Didn't get taken. It was a great show. It was a great pilot. But it's hard to get people whose job is to invest their money to think about impact in that way. Have you experienced the same thing? So Sarah, have you experienced the same thing in your own fundraising efforts, or have you been blessed with impactful money all around?
I think there is a big difference between what you are told and then what actually the final results are. So if you're talking to investors, we see that a lot of seem to care far more about sustainability, about SDGs, about like impact investing. So they want to invest in startups that have an impact, that really like drive society forward, etc. But however, honestly speaking, this is more or less only something tipping the scales maybe. Because investors, from my experience, they are not ready, so the vast majority, to take lower return on investments just because it's sustainable. And as we know, I mean, like for the textile industry, that's just actually one reason why we couldn't like play within the already existing best practices and just like make them a bit better. You either have to disrupt them, or the sustainability game is not going to work for you if you really want to have an impact. Because here, sustainability is great, but it's even greater to combine that with a very solid business model and still with strong unit economics. Because what is sold to investors, so they have the purpose, but they do not see like the real urgency to also take this purpose or realize this purpose with extra costs. And I think here there is a great difference between what is told and what is then actually done, so where actually the cash flow goes, so to speak.
Do you think that the investors feel that it's kind of like philanthropy rather than investment?
I mean, like 2 weeks ago, I've been talking to the vice president of like one of the largest VC firms from the States, and he asked me like, why don't you write like sustainability on your front slide of your pitch deck? And I was like, I mean, like we are sustainable at a core, but this is not what investors want to see. And I mean, like there is like a shift into that direction, that they somehow point towards that. But then I wanted to know what actually was standing behind him to ask me that question. And he said, yeah, we have to justify that in front of our stakeholders. So they are asking that how sustainable is actually the investment.
Oh.
However, what he told me as well is that just this nice justification in front of stakeholders that they're doing sustainable investments is no reason is no argument to explain why, for example, a portfolio is performing worse, because they are maybe not exploiting like every resource until the super duper final end.
Mm-hmm. So did I understand that correctly, that it's also a little bit used as a balancing act for the bottom line in the end of the year, saying, well, we have these sustainability ones and that's why we had a lower turnout this year, or did I understand that correctly?
I mean, like I would, let's put it in other words, sustainability is no argument, not still today, with which you could, from an investor's, at least in the startup sector, really like justify a lower return on investment. So whenever you want to really, from the deepest of your personal heart, so to speak, want to realize sustainability, you better make sure that this comes hand in hand with like a strong business model and still profitability, because otherwise raising capital is going to be really hard, even though they ask for that. But it's this behavioral gap between what is asked for and what is told and what like the public says, and then where the cash, so to speak, actually goes.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting progression. Let's see if this is something that can people start putting their money where their mouth is earlier rather than later, hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
Coming back to existing leaders at existing companies and CEOs who wield perhaps hundreds of people, thousands of people in their companies, or at least have them at their disposal. How can leaders help each other in these kind of situations? You were talking about, yes, you're coming into a company with all these traditions and all these steadfast things, and you can't just snap your fingers and make a change. It needs to exist there already and then be nurtured, right? I'm thinking that kind of a conversation with another CEO, you can really kind of swap war stories there, right? Probably, or what kind of alliances? I mean, there's the CEO climate leaders with the World Economic Forum. We have several things here in St. Gallen once in a while. What can these alliances do, and does it really help to network with other CEOs?
Yeah, very much so, because we tend to think in silos, and this is a problem where you need to think in a very broad way. And so, obviously, Swiss Re and many other companies, we have said we're going to be net zero 2030 for our own operation. We're actually carbon neutral since 2003, but that's by buying certificates, which is not perfect. Right, yes. But the next step is, to extract CO2 from the atmosphere also, and further lower our own footprint. And then on the asset side, we have about 100 billion of assets. It's 2050 because you need to accompany basically the whole world to this 2050 goal. And on the underwriting side, so that's scope 3, that's where we take risk from our partners that we're net zero by 2050. Mm-hmm. And so obviously we have our own plans, how to get there, but it's very hard to do it in isolation. And every industry leader typically talks within their own industry. But this particular forum you talked about, this WEF CEO Climate Alliance, is extremely interesting because it's 113 CEOs who have all committed the same thing, but they're from different industries. Mm-hmm. The scope 1, 2, 3 footprint of this alliance is 3.4 gigatons of CO2. So it's the third biggest country in the world.
Wow.
And that's their whole value chain, is them, plus the whole value chain.
How many people is this?
How many people?
Yeah, like in the group.
Millions and millions of workers in these companies.
No, I meant CEOs. How many CEOs? How many
113
companies?
only.
113.
Yeah, but it's Nestle, Amazon, and all these companies. So the interesting thing is, and this comes from the pressure from investors also, that they joined us. So some believe it, but pressure from investors, which comes from pressure from pension funds and insurance companies. So this alliance is also here, the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance on the UN. We're part of it. It's $5.5 trillion of capital that's committed to net zero and is talking to companies. And it's not against return, it's just a condition, otherwise we don't invest. So it's more a threshold you need to pass. So that pressure gets passed on. These CEO adopt that. And then there's a snowball effect because they need to look through their whole value chain, and they have thousands, tens of thousands, probably more 100,000 companies that deliver to them across the world. And they will have to ask them to be carbon neutral also. And these companies are linked to other companies, and they will, to do that, they will have to also, because of this scope 3 definition, work with their own supply chain. So it's very much what we just heard. And so that makes me much more optimistic because we're going to see in the next 2-3 years a massive wave going through the value chain. And then we're going to hit the hard problems. And the hard problems are in the hard-to-abate industries, so not insurance. It's going to be steel, aluminum, concrete, and in all of these industries, the industry leader know there's solutions out there, not perfect, it's a very small scale, they have experiments, but they know it's going to be more expensive in the beginning, twice as expensive. And since their margins are thin, they think there's no solution. So this is where, sorry for the whole thing, but to explain, this is where this alliance is good because the rest of the value chain hears that and says, no, we are willing to pay. Why? Because for you, it's twice as expensive and you think you're not going to survive. For us, for the car makers, it's 2-3% more expensive car in the end. Because the aluminum and the steel is just a small part of the car. And once you look at it through the value chain and to the end product, it's like $1 or $2 more for an iPhone to be green. It's $500 more for a car. It's $5,000 more for a house. It's always it is 1 to 4% more expensive over all this period of time. It's feasible, but if you don't work across, they will be locked in I can't do it, and the rest will say, okay, we can't work with you. So you need to work across the value chain and make basically purchase agreements in advance, say, yes, we're going to take it once it's online, and I think this is going to accelerate the change.
So commitments to these partnerships give everyone security. I think that's a really interesting aspect that I hadn't thought about before in this whole supply chain management. There are some there are some stronger links in the supply chain that can maybe take on some of the load for the others. I would like to open up to the audience if you have any questions. I have a bunch more questions, but I also want to let everyone else participate. Does anyone here from the live audience like to ask a question? Yes, please. Get a microphone over here.
Hi, I'm Carmen. Thank you very much for your nice insights into the industry and also into the research. I'm a founder of a startup myself, so I've kind of known how big the challenges are, and I wanted to ask you, all of you, how do you think about the big topic of circular economy? Because of course you can do a lot with the new products that are getting produced to start the whole process already sustainable, but how do you think is the potential of like really introducing them into a circular economy and also reuse the tons of goods which are already there, and how do you think could responsible aspiring leaders like accelerate and thrive that momentum?
Thanks, Carmen. Great question. Who wants to take on that mammoth? Here you go.
I can start, and they can probably elaborate from a pragmatic point of view what this means, but we know that circular economy is one of the key business models, like Sarah was talking before about business models that really are meaningful in terms of both impact for environment, for example, but also can create a financial return. Studies have already shown in these industries like steel, aluminium, cement, that depending on the industry and depending how much we close the loop, companies can lower their greenhouse gases between 40 to 70% just by moving to a circular business model. So there's obviously a financial incentive there as well, because that's in essence a waste or a cost that they would otherwise have to somehow bring on board. Maybe it's still free nowadays, but if we start talking about carbon credits and compensation, or the price of internal carbon price going up, then this becomes embedded inside the company. The challenge, of course, is a huge one, but we also know from research like leadership and what we've just heard that taking small steps and counting small wins and celebrating small wins is actually really important, while keeping an eye on the big systemic changes and the disruption of how to actually make this happen. And in order to do that, we need certain kinds of people who can take a sort of paradoxical mindset to this, so this and both approach rather than either or approach, like we either do it or we don't. No, that's not really the answer, or we can't, right? So it's, well, okay, let's take a look at this, and how would we do this, and what can we do, and how can we also collaborate with partners. So the relational aspect to work together is incredibly important to make that happen. But I think from a pragmatic point of view, perhaps we can get some insight.
As Sri, I'm not an expert in the field, but from this alliance, I can see the level of excitement is huge amongst those CEOs where this is a topic. So cement producers already, recycling cement, adding 20% of old cement to the new cement, and that product sells extremely well. And IKEA is known, I don't know if you the example, taking back mattresses, I think it's in the Netherlands, and this is incredibly successful. They have more than, I think, 1 million mattresses coming back, and it's good business, as the CEO always tells me. So there's a lot of excitement. It's a big topic in the production industry. So I think enormous potential.
I can completely, by 200,000% agree on what you already mentioned. So circular economy, I would say, is the long-term way definitely to go, especially like we've been talking about, like the cement industry, like construction industry, also fashion industry. We see that actually already starting from a resource perspective. So like resources are getting, like very high quality basic resources are getting like harder and harder to get, are becoming more expensive. And actually this is something which gives a bit like of hope to me. And when we are talking about can we ever come to the point where we are really living in a circular economy world, from a fashion perspective, there was like a very, very strong driver that like the tipping point was there like last year, and that was when recycled PET plastic, basic material, became cheaper than the virgin PET. That was because the PET prices, they were kind of exploding because the demand was increasing that rapidly. And this really gave room for the recycled PET material production, refinement, however you might call that, to improve and to radically kind of improve when it comes to unit economics, which then turned it into the preferred material for a lot of like fashion suppliers. If you have a look like at Adidas, Nike, they're all offering something with recycled PET, and that's cool. And this is already going into the circular economy direction, I would say, to really think what can we do with the material that has already been used to bring that back to the value cycle and not just throw it away. So in the fashion industry, there are like 40 million tons of garment produced every year that has actually never really been used, maybe worn once or twice, and then it's just like disposed somewhere. And this is actually the starting point where circular economy comes in, because this is so much valuable material and we have to do something with that.
I think that's really interesting what you said about the sneakers as well, because that's, of course, that's the first thing that comes to mind when I think unsustainable fashion industry, is how many sneakers we throw away every year. But did you, perhaps there's a kind of link there that the pressure felt by the industry because of the price going up has kind of forced them to be more sustainable in a way. Could that potentially be something in investors? How could you force an investor to think about sustainability that way? Let's think about that later. Are there any more questions from the audience? Are you happy with those answers? Sorry. Okay, great. Yes, microphone, please.
Thank you very much for the interesting panel discussion. I would have one question for Christian and one for Sarah, actually. First to Christian, maybe as the CEO of a reinsurance company, I guess you're heading a company in one of the industries that will probably be most exposed to climate change or the consequences of climate change in the coming decades, right? And some forecasts say that if we continue on the trajectory we are currently on, the number or the significance of natural disasters will tremendously increase. My question to you is, to what extent will you be exposed to that? How can you deal with it? And like, how are you prepared for those for this scenario? And to Sarah, thank you for introducing your very interesting business model. It's very fascinating, but at the same point, I'm also asking myself if reshoring is part of kind of disrupting non-sustainable supply chains. What point or like what role will emerging economies where the fashion industry is right now producing non-sustainable play in the future, when a lot of the production will maybe be relocated or will be automized, as you say?
Two interesting questions. Maybe we'll start with you, Christian, with the...
Okay, yeah.
How does
natural
insurance
catastrophe,
deal
I'm
with
used to
this?
that, yeah.
Exactly.
Being associated with it. So the climate science is differentiated on the different risks. So there's a clear increase in fires, in hail, heavy rainfall, flood, drought. We call them secondary perils. There's not enough evidence at this stage of hurricanes becoming stronger or whatever. They were always here, etc. But that's the current state of research, and we have to adapt the prices every year. So I always tell people we don't take off the climate risk from the world, because it's not a risk, it's a certainty. We insure volatility around the median, but if the median is very clearly is moving up, that's not insured. We just insure that. But we are close observers, and so what can we do? I think the most important thing is to follow the Paris Accord, to try to minimize the increase of temperature in the world. That's the most obvious one to do and the most urgent one, and as you know, we're not there yet. And if you think about what is necessary in the world in real terms to achieve that, it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. It's probably one of the hardest projects humanity has ever undertaken, and we need to be ready for that. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is adaptation. Right? So if you can't prevent it, there's a whole huge dimension of adaptation, which is a big topic, as you know, particularly in developing worlds, but it's everywhere. So it's going to be, do you build in floodplains or plains that will become floodplains, for example, building standards, reforestation of mangrove trees in front of coasts, because that prevents the strength of the water rise and the damages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that can be done on the adaptation side, but I'm always a bit depressed if we jump immediately to adaptation, because I think the most urgent thing is to stop the fire first. Probably you can't do it first, you need to do it in parallel, but a lot of effort. I prefer to put most focus on first extinguishing the fire as much as possible, and then dealing with this adaptation, which will be necessary.
I think insurance having to deal with risk at this moment in time is probably not the easiest. But I think it's important also to be transparent. I think it's a very interesting question because of that. There's a lot of people that don't understand how insurance companies make their decisions, it's when the game keeps changing, particularly, right? Coming to your question, are you ready to answer? Do you want to repeat it?
Yeah, sure. So you have been asking about like the role that emerging countries and all this workforce that is living there actually nowadays is going to play like in the future in the fashion industry. And I think this is a very interesting question because when you are arguing with people that are kind of, let's call them the pro-fast fashion alliance, they always say like, I mean like it's better that they have some kind of work there, so it would be so unfair to take away their work and just reallocate it somewhere like in Switzerland or Europe or even Poland where the working conditions are better because then like the Bangladesh children, they're going to die of starvation or something like that. So honestly speaking, from my perspective, digitization is the future and especially and also in the fashion industry. So I don't think that like 200 years ahead, and I'm really speaking about 200 years because the fashion industry is maybe a bit like, not on the front end, but when we're talking about the internal, the back end processes, because there is so like the labor costs, they're not pressing enough, is a bit slower maybe. We are not going to see this kind of factories anymore where there are like wage dumped workers working and things like that, like in Bangladesh, Indonesia or whatever. And we already see that in countries where wages are rising, that big firms are starting to reallocate their production facilities. For example, we see that there are already firms starting to close their factories or their production grounds in China and go to cheaper countries, which are nowadays still Bangladesh, but even there we see an increase in wages, and now it's kind of Ethiopia, the next place to be, because the wages are still low enough. So at a certain point in time, I think digitization is going to replace these super duper cheap workers, but we are not going to kind of make them unemployed because of that. Because I think what is wishful for all of them is the entire overall increase in living standards, and that's the ultimate goal of actually every sustainability measures we are taking to give like good living conditions, like a good entire world environment they're living in to all the people all over the world. And when we're talking about like emerging countries, I think this is the place where we can have like the largest impact when we're talking about the textile sector, because the workers there, they're really like, the working conditions, they're really deep shit, so to speak. So why not bring digitization to these countries to really improve their education, to improve their working conditions and really have a substantial impact, a positive impact in their life.
Are you happy with that answer? Thank you very much. Yeah, okay, fantastic. I have a question that's a little uncomfortable. I hope you're okay with this. Sometimes it seems as if we think there's a silver bullet. You know, every company thinks they have a silver bullet that if we just do this one thing, all of a sudden we'll be way more sustainable, and we'll only have a couple years where we have to sacrifice a little bit profit, but you know, whatever, it'll be fine. There is no silver bullet a lot of the times, right? So I think what my naive question at the beginning of the panel that I asked you was definitely naive, but also kind of feeds into this. You know, if the person at the helm or the person in power in a small company like yours, you can lead very personally, you can lead quite effectively, I'm sure, and in a big company like this, if we have a leader who's not interested in sustainability, just switching out the leader, will that change anything in the company? Do you think? I mean, Judith, maybe you've done the research.
I've done some research on this. an interesting dilemma. Typically, when we talk about switching leaders, we also talk about the ability for some change, in focus to happen for companies. And so there's research that shows definitely when you have a new CEO at the helm, they tend to be more, the company tends to become more sustainable for whatever reason. Maybe there's some external pressures, maybe there's just a desire by internal stakeholders, like maybe the board, to push towards this. The reason new leaders can do this is because they don't have the legacy and the baggage, right, from spending maybe 10, 15, 20 years at a company. Now, this isn't always going to be the case, because there are also situations where a company might be facing financial distress, for example, so really struggling to make profit, maybe struggling to make profit for several years. We have seen in those kinds of scenarios that actually bringing in a new CEO is not great for sustainability. It's great probably for making more profit, because the CEO's focus will then be to turn that company around financially. Right. But actually in those kinds of scenarios, hiring a CEO from within, so what we call grooming, right, a CEO, it seems that those kinds of CEOs have still that connection with all the stakeholders internally and externally, and maybe feel some kind of legacy or responsibility to continue what was promised to those stakeholders and bring that on board. So it really depends on the context.
So like Sarah said earlier about you need to disrupt something. You can't just make these tiny tweaks and changes when in your industry at least, and especially in the supply chain. In your experience, Christiana, when it comes to the understanding of your entire company perhaps, or you've been there for 20 years now, do you think that you have caught the syndrome that she was discussing?
I can recognize all of that, right? So if you think about the future, it is likely that a company like that would look for a CEO that is in tune, unless there was a board who thinks it's going completely the wrong direction with somebody totally different. If you did that, which is unlikely, I think there would still be this instinct everywhere, because this has caught fire, right? This whole topic, sustainability, people would still work on that, educate the new CEO, and if not, they would just still go on, right? I mean, I think it's so strong and so distributed that they would find a way. It would not die off. I cannot imagine that. It's too strong. So
then you've done your job.
Well, it's not just me. It's everything is. What you said before resonated with me. Right? Things are not linear. This linear thinking is a very bad thinking. Thinking there's a problem and there's a simple solution. If you do one thing, it's solved. That's not the case. It's always a network. There's a lot of factors around, lots of stakeholders, but also within a company. And so there's mechanisms that exist that you need to understand if you want to influence it or send it in a certain direction.
I'm going to ask the question to you a little differently. I mean, all three of you are, in the grand scheme of things, and particularly when it comes to decision makers and leaders and CEOs, you're all quite young. And well, this is a big factor. And all you teenagers out there, when you're their age, you will also think you're young. So just telling you. But for you particularly, because I think you are the youngest on this panel, are you aware of a generational perhaps misunderstanding or a disconnect in your industry? I mean, you were talking about these kind of, it hasn't been disrupted on a technological level to the extent that other industries have been disrupted, and therefore you're talking maybe from over here in the kind of future realm, and they're here in the present saying, what the hell are you talking about, right? Matt, that's a question.
I mean, here I would say the strange thing is that everyone out there knows what's actually going on and how severe the problems are. So when you start talking about sustainability, you will never ever face someone who says like, yeah, well, it's not existent, or it's not real, or we do not have to care. I think the big question or the big gap actually is between the, yeah, we do care and we see this problem and we acknowledge blah, 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 to stepping over from talking about that to really then doing and taking measures. And I think here, this conventional, coming back to the textile industry, there are the competitive pressure is immense. It's like amazing, it's huge. Also like established players among each other, but then there are always new market participants, which is cool if you have a startup and then you can like try just to enter the market that way. But however, the competitive pressure is immense. And the established players, or like the market agents, however you might call them, I think this thought structure that things have to be played the way they have been played, and we just need to make them more efficient, or just like do these little twerks, like improve efficiency, or have a little impact for the better, that this is the only way how to stay profitable and too competitive. I think this is the thought structure which is still deeply rooted in the minds of a lot of, if you call that, older generational players. But I think in the fashion industry, on the other hand, it's that the speed of the market dynamics there, that like rapidly paced. I think it's not that they're not acknowledging that something has to happen. The question is only what is going on. So you're not talking like to close doors or something. So everyone knows that, but the question is what to do, and also how, like, the dimensions of the actions that are taken, how large and extensive those actually are.
There's a lot of conversating still to be done, definitely, also intergenerationally. We have run out of time, my darling panelists. So I would like to ask our small but very engaged audience to give a big round of applause for Judith Walls, Sarah Nord, and Christian Mumenthaler. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
So we are back to the central theme of today's event, which is the award of the GLC 2021 winner. We have heard from the three finalists. It's been, now the jury has been out discussing, and now we have Professor Schanz back here, so we definitely have an answer. Please come join me on stage. Amanda Schanz is joining me on stage. We are going to have our... So I'd like to welcome the other remote guests also to the stage in our screen here. Fantastic. We have Professor Alexander Betts, who is the Leopold Muller Professor of Forced Migration and International Affairs at the University of Oxford. We have Kim Pullman, who is co-founder and chair of Reboot the Future. And here on the stage with me, Amanda Schanz. Hello. So we are all very excited to hear who will be third place, second place, and first place winner of the GLC 2021. Alexander Betts, maybe we start with you. Can we do this third, second, first?
Yes,
is this okay?
absolutely.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. So, Professor Alexander Betts, third
First
place.
of all,
yes.
Huge congratulations to everybody who's participated in, contributed to, and led this year's GLC. I think sitting in a university that's 800 years old, I think that universities should be measured by their ability to put the greatest minds at the service of humanity. And the GLC, I think, encapsulates that idea, that people who have skills and talents from across the world, who have the privilege of university education, can do more than just stay within academia, can reach out, work together, collaborate, and have impact on some of the defining challenges of our time. And I think listening to all three of the brilliant projects and presentations today, we've heard examples of that, of practical, innovative ideas to tackle health, climate change, and gender. And as was said earlier today, you are all winners. Everyone who's participated in the GLC is a winner. And these three projects we all thought had real strengths, and in some cases, some areas for improvement. And that's good, because we need you to be able to improve these ideas, because these are not easy global challenges to tackle. Nevertheless, I want to announce the third winner, if you like, in third place in this final. And we've decided collectively that it is the project known as Become a Wife for a Day. Christiana, Chippo, and Alexandra, there were things we really liked about this proposal. And I'm really proud as a man in particular to be able to say that there was a real strength to focusing on challenging gender norms around unpaid domestic work. We thought the focus on having more support and recognition for caregivers, whether male, female, whatever part of society they're from, was very important. And the emphasis in particular on encouraging men to be more aware of caregiving, to play a leadership role in that, struck all of us as important, and me in particular. When I think about leadership, I don't just think about my public role. I also think about my role as a man looking after my 3 children, who happen to be 6, 3, and 1. And I think it's very important, particularly as men, but in all aspects of society, we can be publicly visible in recognize the importance of that as a shared responsibility. The project focused very realistically on one starting point in the world, Africa, and some particular countries in Africa, and showed real sensitivity to differences across regions in norms of caregiving and the way they relate to gender. It sought to innovatively use social media as a vehicle for change in that particular region. And so we thought the problem, the challenge that was identified was really important. There were elements of innovative use of social media. There were a couple of areas where we'd give you some critical pushback. We didn't particularly like the framing of Become a Wife for a Day, because we all thought that this isn't necessarily about being a wife. It's about caregiving and supporting caregivers, no matter what their primary social position or identity should be. And we thought those norms should be challenged more directly by the project language. We also thought there were areas where the mechanism for change, how the campaign would take off and be implemented, could be clarified. But nevertheless, I think on behalf of all of the panel, we want to congratulate you for an inspiring project, for laying it out clearly with some great stories in the presentation, and for taking on a really important challenge. So congratulations, Christiana, Chippo, and Alexandra.
Thank you, Professor Betts, for those inspiring words, and what a wonderful introduction and response to the project. Very, very cool. So, Kim Pullman, we are coming to second place.
Well, thank you very much, the GLC team, for inviting me, and I share Professor Betts' words on how this project is a fantastic project. I hope that all of the participants have enjoyed working on their projects, and especially learning about the SDGs and how important they are to embed them in your work. We will definitely have a changed world if such intelligent and ambitious people as you do embrace them in your work going forward. So, second place, I would like to congratulate Ankit, Jacob, Max, Robin, and Andrea. You've done a great job and come up with a really, really beautiful idea. We loved Medorum, the fact that it is really focused on the community. There were several things about it that we particularly liked, that it is case-based, very specific. You involve different aspects like the training and internships. I'm a big one for encouraging listening, so I particularly liked that aspect of it. You had a really compelling story, some startling statistics that just brought up the need for shared knowledge. And this idea of shared knowledge really emphasizing the trying to democratize more medical knowledge is really, we shared that value enormously. Again, there were one or two things that we thought could have been improved. We wondered if you had investigated some other platforms that Professor Betts had been aware of that do also share knowledge, and wondered if you had looked into that at all and made a distinction from them, or could collaborate in the end with them, because collaboration is super important nowadays. We can get so much more done by collaboration. And then the second thing is, so we weren't particularly sure how you were going to carry that out. Maybe you got it clear, but that wasn't really presented in the presentation to us very clearly. So if you haven't, if it's not clear to you, you might want to think about that a bit more. So thank you very much, and congratulations.
So some great feedback. Thank you guys so much, and maybe you can share those other apps that they should look into with the team. I'm sure they would appreciate that. Now we're here on stage in person, but we know, of course, now there is only one left.
That's right. So it's it isn't a terrible surprise who the winner is. But before I do make the formal announcement, I just wanted to say how inspiring the GLC is. It's an incredible event that brings together the young, incredibly intelligent people and throws them together in a week and gets them to think together, learn together, and implement together. And I just think that that's an incredible part of everyone's story now. So all of the people who were involved across all of the projects, regardless of whether you were shortlisted or not, you enacted responsible leadership this week. You know, you learned about responsible leadership. And a really important part around leadership, something that we oftentimes forget when we're educators, professors, or students, is that really leadership is about action, and it's about doing. And so I love all of the plans that I've heard today. I love all of the exciting projects that you've drawn up. But what I can't wait to see is when these are put into action and when you're able to see some real impact. So, so the winner of this challenge was Gale, and so that's Ben, Ruby-Ann, Ari, and Duong. A huge congratulations to these four. There was a few things. There were a few things that struck us as really interesting about this group. The first one really didn't have anything, well, I suppose it does have something to do with the project, but it was around the diversity of the group itself and how we could see that they leveraged the diversity amongst them. So people from all over the world got together and they came up with this project, and how neat it is that they were listening to one another, empathizing, integrating ideas from different parts of the world. How often do we get an opportunity to do that? And these students did it, and they came up with something brilliant. It's a great example of how integrating cultures and listening can really produce something meaningful. The second point that we thought was really interesting is there was this focus on education, but not just on science behind the idea, but instead on the impact of climate change. And you know, for young people to come along and to be able to say, actually, the way you've taught me isn't right. And you're so close to when this happened, when you were educated on science, and you were able to really reflect on that and say, you know what, that's just not good enough. And instead, we need to do it this way. And those are the things that we need to hear, people in education need to hear from young people. The third important part of this project was around generating local solutions to global problems. Climate change, we hear about it all of the time, right? And it's normally talked about as a global problem where international leaders or supranational leaders are the ones who are coming up with plans to address it. Whereas this particular project was innovative because it really made global local. It empowered people to contextualize knowledge and to create bespoke solutions for their own communities. Which brings me to the last point that we found was really interesting, but at the same time, we felt it was underdeveloped in the presentation. And that was how the community was engaged. So how are you going to fully get people into these WhatsApp groups? How is that going to happen in terms of topics and ideas? I'm sure you have ideas for how you're going to do that. We just didn't hear them in the presentation. And we wanted a little bit more granularity around how you were going to make that happen, because education from professor to students, as we all know, doesn't work very well. We need to have dialogue between the two actors to be able to really get people to make movement along these issues. So we all need change makers like all of you. folks who were in the final 3 today, but also everyone else who was part of this amazing week. And so I do hope that all of our paths cross again, and we're able to see you put some of these ideas into action in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all 3 of you. You've been a fantastic jury. It was not an easy decision, I'm sure, but it's really great that you gave feedback also on the improvement possibilities. I think that's definitely more than the teams could ask for, and I'm sure they're very happy with your decision. Thank you all so much. And a big applause for our jury, please, again. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. So, we have now seen, we have 3 winners, 1 big winner, and our big winner is going to actually be able to go to Oxford and get mentoring to actually bring their project forward and accelerate kind of the implementation and the doing behind the thinking and theorizing that has been done so far. So we're really looking forward to see how also the alumni community and the community flourish after the GLC. And basically, we also want to say, use these connections that you've made over this past week. Use also the insights that you've gained to kind of carry you forward on your path, whatever that may be, and really help it let you grow into a fantastic character who really thinks sustainability with every step of their life. We have winners, and of course, also the global leadership challenge is, of course, coming to an end, but it was not possible to do this, even in this hybrid format, without a lot of help and a lot of support from our partners. And it's just really be amazing to see it come to fruition, but we do have to take a short moment to thank a whole bunch of people. So first, thanks to Dr. Edward Brooks, Angeli Sarker, Priscilla Masako-Meiler from the University of Oxford, Beat Ulrich, Felix Rüdiger, Andreas Neff, and Armando Peyer from the SGS, so St. Gallen Symposium. And they, as a cross-organizational team, have worked tirelessly, and trust me, I know, I've been on some of these calls. They have worked tirelessly to make this GLC 2021 a reality. And of course, to our main partners, Lehman Foundation and Templeton World Charity Foundation, whose support has made GLC 2021 possible. And also, of course, to our award jury, who we just saw, Professor Alexander Betts, Kim Pullman, and Professor Amanda Schanz, and to the more than 20 senior advisors and speakers who've joined from across the realms of business, policy, science, civil society, and given our members a real inspirational time over the past few days. And of course, thank you to the audience and also the global partners at the University of Oxford and St. Gallen Symposium. And last but certainly not least, our GLC members who've joined from Oxford, St. Gallen, and virtually from more than 30 countries around the globe. Thank you guys so much for being part of this. So, thank you. So to all of you here in the room physically, thank you guys also for participating, and also the lively discussion, the great questions for the panel. Thank you all so much. We wish you all the best for the coming year, and of course, all power to you for your future endeavors. So yeah, have a warm and loving holiday season. Thank you all very much.